afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan and welcome to the latest episode of our sports show. As you know, we've been previewing and airing live on air for the last month or so about our upcoming documentary, our rugby documentary called Global Rugby Legends, My Life in Rugby. We're speaking to renowned rugby players over the decades from the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere countries. So Ireland, England, France, Wales, and Italy, and then we think of Southern Hemisphere, we think of South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and recently Argentina as well. And my guest this evening is, what can you say about this guy? He was nominated for World Player of the Year in 2004. He's played inside centre, half-back and fly half for his country. From 2002 to 2016, he's made 103 appearances, scoring 698 points. He's played over to be made the 2003 Rugby World Cup squad. He was in the Rugby 2000 Rugby 7 World Cup squad as well. Scored 40 test points in that Rugby World Cup and was the number 12 starting for the Wallabies throughout that Rugby World Cup. And then 8 years later, he came back and featured in another Rugby World Cup and making the Rugby World Cup final in 2015. He's also played for the Barbarians, a astonishing career as well in terms of foreign rugby. He's played for too long, 121 appearances, 321 points. He's played in Japan for Sunchi Singolats, 26 appearances, 196 points. He's also played in LA Giltas for USA for 14 appearances, 96 points. But I was looking at, first of all, Matt, thanks for joining us. And Matt, I was looking at the background there and the family history, and the Giteau family is steeped in sort of rugby history. And there was always a question whether will you be as good as what your father was, Ron, who was a really good rugby league player, and then your sister Kirsty, a dual code for rugby league and rugby union. So I imagine the overball was on your hands since you were 2 or 3 years old, Matt. You didn't have to go far from the tree in terms of getting inspiration.
No, I didn't. I think I always had a football in my hand. My dad played professional rugby league, not rugby union, but well, not really professional, I suppose. They were amateur in those days, but he played what's now professional. So, yeah, then from playing, he went into coaching. So I was always around rugby league, and that was actually my passion, not rugby union. So from an early age, I always wanted to play sport, kick the footy, learn from the guys that my dad would be coaching, their trick moves and all that type of stuff. So I've always really had an interest in it.
And I suppose, Matt, in terms of, was Kirsty brought up alongside that as well? Was there fierce sort of sibling rivalry between yourselves and the Giteau house? And did you play any other sports in terms of growing up, or was it strictly a rugby sort of league sort of atmosphere in terms of rugby and rugby union, obviously, for Kirsty as well?
No, we I think before PlayStations, before the internet, what kids would do is you're outside and you're playing sport in the afternoon. You're not inside, you're not watching TV. So we played cricket, basketball, rugby league, Australian football, soccer. There's every sport that you could imagine we'd be doing. We like to be competitive, and we're always outdoors.
Yeah, and I suppose, Matt, in terms of growing up now and going to secondary school and all that, and in terms of what was the sort of ambition, what was the dream in terms of profession for Matt Giteau? Did you want to become a banker, go into business, a doctor, or do you want to pursue a career in sort of sport? Or was it always that goal to be a Wallaby? Did you look on and see the success in 1991 and see Tim Horan? Obviously, that was later along in life, but was that 1991 team an inspiration for you?
I think it was not inspiring for me, more so, but obviously we celebrated the Wallabies' success in Australia, being Australian. So it was more, as I said, rugby league was the sport that I wanted to do. It was the sport I loved. My father played it for Canberra Raiders, and that was kind of my dream. Living in Canberra, I wanted to play for the Raiders. It was just that because I only played rugby league, and then I was getting in a lot of trouble at school, mixing with the wrong crowd. So my parents sent me to a private school. That private school only played rugby union, and you had to pick a sport for the school. If you played rugby league outside of the school rules were that the league players had to play rugby for the school. So on a Saturday, I played rugby, because we had to. And then on a Sunday, I played league because I enjoyed it. And the longer that I was involved in that environment, the school, obviously, the first 15, which is the number one team, the year 12, the high school team, they were seen as gods around the school. So by the time my time came and I was in my last year of school, that was something I wanted to achieve, and I wanted to play for the first 15. So I gave up rugby league for that year and never played again.
Never played again. And was that sort of tough on your father? Did your father respect your sort of decisions on that, or did you have a chat given your father's history in terms of rugby league?
No, never. I think similar to myself, I've got young kids. You just want them to be happy. You want them to play sport. I don't think in those days, I don't think it was looking likely that I was going to be a professional sportsman, really. So I think my father was just happy if I was happy. And, yeah, so I just gave up league and he'd come and support me, like a normal parent would.
And obviously then you sort of kicked off your career with the Brumbies and in terms of the opportunity. And when did that sort of come around, that opportunity to come out from boarding school, college? Was it a gradual sort of progression, or did you have to sort of look around for a while in terms of opportunity, or were you involved in Wallaby underage teams up along in terms of international teams?
No, a lot of the juniors I developed quite late. So the under 16s and 15s, like national, even ACT teams, I wasn't playing. ACT being the region, where I was living. So I wasn't even in our state teams. Then it was just in that final year when I was in year 12, which is the final year in Australia, that I got picked in the ACT team, or the ACT schools team, competed in the nationals, then got picked in Australia A, which isn't the main squad. It's the kind of the feeder underneath team. We actually played Ireland in that, and I think we lost about 60. It was a shocking score, actually. We got flogged by Ireland. So it was still a cool experience. But then after that, finished school, went to university, the Brumbies Academy. I got picked up in the Brumbies Academy just from playing local under 19s club football, not even first grade with the open boys. So it was under 19s. And from that Brumbies Academy, I was training quite well and hitting really good fitness scores, I think. And I got picked in the Australian Sevens team only after being in the academy for a short while. And Eddie Jones, who was the national coach of the Wallabies at the time, came to one of our training sessions, a Sevens training session. After the session, he told the coach that we had Glenn Ella. He said, I really like that kid. I might pick him on the end of season tour. I didn't have a Super Rugby contract. I'd not played much rep football at all. Mine was a really, really quick progression. And at the end of 2002, I was touring with the Wallabies, catching passes off George Gregan, Sterling Mortlock's there, Stephen Larkham. Like, these are guys probably 6 months earlier I was watching in a pub them on TV. So my rise was really strange and really fast. But, yeah, it wasn't like I was groomed to ever play for the Wallabies from a young age.
And obviously you mentioned that coming in right sort of fast and that sort of natural sort of progression. And then you're no sooner are you on the sort of Wallabies team than you get to pick to go to a World Cup in 2003. And what was that atmosphere like with making that squad? I know you didn't probably feature as much as you featured a lot more in World Cups further down the line, but was that a real learning experience for you? And did that whet the appetite even more to say, I want to be back here and make a real name for myself in future Rugby World Cups?
Yeah, I mean, well, that World Cup in particular, I started a few games. I started a couple of the minnow games, the games that were expected to win. Which gave me a lot of confidence. Then I'd come off the bench in a lot of the big games and was adding a little bit of impact. So it was the first time that I actually felt like I belonged in that arena. Previously, when I first toured in 2002, my test debut was against England. And there's like 8 minutes to go and we're down by a point. And at the time, Eddie Jones had a scoring system. For everything that you did well, you got a plus point. So if you made a pass, plus. If you made a bad pass, -1. I finished that 8 minutes with -4. So when I finished that game, it was almost like, oh, this is a rapid rise. And it proved to me, well, it didn't prove, but it just showed that I had a lot of work to do and I wasn't really ready for that test environment. Whereas that World Cup, playing a lot of the lesser teams and getting some good game time and playing well, I actually started to feel like I belong. And even the fact that we lost the World Cup, for me, it just seemed like that squad and playing for Australia, we always win. So I was like, okay, well, I'm devastated we lost, but next World Cup, I'll win that. I just thought it'd be as easy as that. Then that next World Cup, we get knocked out in the quarterfinals. Then 2011 comes around and I'm not picked in the squad. So it was almost like, oh, wow, that opportunity that I had was really special.
And I suppose, Matt, in terms of 2003 Rugby World Cup, a few seniors had stepped away in 2000 from this 1999 team, but the rest of that winning 99 teams probably departed after that 03 World Cup as well. So obviously it was a new sort of build going into the next sort of season, and obviously young players were catapulted into more prominent positions. And 04 for you was a remarkable year. You were nominated for Rugby World Cup Player of the Year. You probably made that inside 12 position your own in terms of that. So did that sort of changing of the guard, was that sort of a prominent for you? Did you write this next crop of Wallabies are ready to step into some of the shoes of the greats like Gregan and Eales and Horn and all those who had now, Matt Burke, who are now the part of the scene?
Yeah, well, I mean, Timmy Horan wasn't around and John Eales wasn't around when I first came in 2002. So it didn't feel like a huge shift. Obviously, George Gregan played till 2007. Stephen Larkin was still there. David Giffen, like these guys that have won the World Cup, Jeremy Paul, they were involved. Matt Burke, they were still around. Joe Roth. So, I mean, I could keep going. I feel like I'm leaving people out, but these are the legends that we were around, and they were still involved. So in 2004, we had a really good Super Rugby season. We won the competition, and I think out of the squad of 30, it could have been 17 or 18 Brumby players that were actually picked in the Wallaby squad at that time. So it felt almost like family throughout that whole year. And I think that obviously is why I felt so comfortable playing in that test arena. You know, I felt like it was actually, you know, a level that I could not only handle, but at times add some value. So, yeah, it was a big year for me personally.
And that 07 Rugby World Cup, obviously, you mentioned that sort of shock departure as well. Was that a sort of a soul-searching moment for the entire squad? Had you real aspirations of going there and winning the tournament out? Did you feel that it was between yourselves and the All Blacks? Obviously, we know South Africa and England had a big things to say, but did you feel going into that Rugby World Cup that you were one of the farm teams going into it, or did you feel that maybe things leading into that camp weren't going too great?
No, everything was perfect. We had a great camp. The lead up to the World Cup was fantastic. Yeah, we were playing some great football. We were based in Montpellier. Everything was really good. The feel amongst the group was amazing. It was just, unfortunately, the one game that we probably didn't perform at our best was at a quarterfinal time, the knockout stages. So it was just, don't know, when that final whistle went, we had an opportunity to still win it. I think Sterling Mortlock had a penalty kick at the death and missed. It was a very tough shot. But yeah, once that whistle went, it was almost like reality hit him. Like, oh, we're out, we're done. So it was, it was really tough. That was a pretty tough moment.
And I suppose, Matt, I'm going to jump on now back to your club career before I finish with Australia again. And after that 2007, we'll sort of fast forward. Then 2008, you moved to fly half under Robbie Deans. But then you decided in 2011, I want to try something different. And you moved to the Northern Hemisphere and you moved to Toulon and 121 appearances. And you were obviously with Toulon for a good while. You probably thought yourself, Yeah, that's my days playing with Australia, start to finish. But Michael Cheika then got into the hot seat of Australia, and he wanted to bring back some of the over sort of seas players. And was that sort of an interesting conversation with yourself and Michael Cheika? And how did it come about? And were you just think to yourself, right, I'm just going to enjoy playing Toulon. I had a great career with Australia. I played in 2 Rugby World Cups, and that's that done now. I'm just going to enjoy a sort of a club career and experience other countries and culture. Was it a big shock to you, first of all, when Cheika came calling, and how did that opportunity to go to Toulon originate as well?
So the Toulon move, I'd been playing Super Rugby and in that test environment for 10 years. So the basic season, how it would go, you play Super Rugby, then you play Tri-Nations, which was Tri-Nations at the time. Then you've got your overseas, the Autumn Internationals, the tour. You got 2 weeks off, or you got about 4 weeks off maybe, but 2 weeks where you can relax. Then it starts up again, pre-season, Super Rugby, Tri-Nations, overseas tour, and that would happen every year, except every 4th year was a World Cup. So I'd been in that cycle for about 10 years. And in 2011, at the start of the year, I decided I want to go overseas. I want to go to France. It's a country I love, and I want to experience something new. But I was hoping that I'd still get one more World Cup in, which didn't happen. But I'd already decided before I'd been cut from the Wallabies to experience something new. Then when I was over I went to Wales. I went to the test. Australia played Wales. I did some stuff for BBC, I think it was. And I'd had a few drinks, caught up with the boys that night. Then the next morning, I was in the bathroom at the airport throwing up. And I just wasn't feeling very well from the night before. And just cleaned myself up. And as I'm washing my hands, Michael Cheika comes in. He says, "Oh, Giteau, how you going?" I said, "Yeah, good. How you going?" He said, "Good." He said, "What do you think about, would you be interested in coming back and playing for the Wallabies?" And I didn't know if I was still pissed or what was happening here. And I was like, "Yeah, I think that'd be amazing, if that's an opportunity, but I don't think we can, because at that time you had to be in Australia to play for Australia." He said, "Well, just leave it with me and we'll see what we can do." Over the course of the next, year, we would talk and discuss. And he moved to the Waratahs, and he said, "Do you want to come back and play for the Waratahs? Super Rugby. If you do that, then you can play for the Wallabies." I said, "Look, I don't want to be disrespectful for the Wallabies, but me and my family, we're really happy here in Toulon. We're very settled. We enjoy the French lifestyle. I'm not interested in Super Rugby." He said, "Okay, well, give me one more crack. I'll have one more crack at the board and see if we can get this thing over the line." And they came up with that 60 cap rule, which basically he worked out that it means that you've played for your country and showed loyalty for 8 years, that then you're given the right to go overseas and still be picked. So that passed, and I was very fortunate that passed.
And obviously, it consulted playing in a Rugby World Cup final, a highlight of any sort of rugby union player. Obviously, it wasn't the results you sort of wanted on that sort of day, but a Rugby World Cup final, it probably meant that from the paths you came from playing sevens rugby to playing a Rugby World Cup final, it was the trajectory of maybe a dream come true, and was obviously your father and your family and your loved ones being there to see you in the Rugby World Cup final. For you, even though you got to play in the final, do you still consider yourself a winner, even though I know there's probably results having got to play in the final?
No, definitely. I don't consider myself a winner at all. I think once you play, this sport professionally, you're one or the other. You're a winner or a loser. And unfortunately, we lost. But it was certainly something I appreciated a lot more than I did in 2003. As I touched upon, I just thought that you make a World Cup final all the time, any World Cup we go to. And, that obviously wasn't the case. But yeah, to get back there and compete in obviously the pinnacle of our sport, that was pretty special. But it probably, because I appreciated the position I was in so much more, it hurt a lot more as well. So, it still stings me now. I'm obviously, I'm through it. It's not something where I dwell on it every day, but it would have been, it would have been really nice to win that one.
And final two questions for you, Matt. This is an Irish documentary, so we got to ask you, you played a fly half, you played it inside 12 as well. Coming up against Ireland in terms of the opposite numbers, where there was a fly half or an inside centre, who did you sort of test you the most? Who did you sort of relish going up against playing in that green jersey?
Well, I mean, you obviously got the legends that a lot of people talk about. You know, obviously Ryan O'Driscoll, Ron O'Gara, they were great competitors. But I always found Gordon Darcy really tough to handle. He was a strong, stocky player. He was a competitor, had some good ball skills. But, yeah, he was just someone that, you know, obviously got a lot of respect for because he was a great fella off the pitch as well. But he was someone that would often ask a lot of questions of me. And I knew up against him that it was always going to be a tough game.
Okay. And finally, Matt Giteau, if you looked in the mirror now and you saw the rugby player of 10 years ago playing in his peak maybe, and maybe that 2004 rugby player standing across the way from you, how would you describe him as a player in terms of attributes, if you'd put your analyst head on, in terms of what were the strengths of Matt Giteau?
That's a question for you. I don't really look at myself in that way. I think in any way, really, I wouldn't be able to tell you my strengths or weaknesses. Actually, I could tell you my weaknesses. That's pretty easy because it's something that I would constantly try and work on, you know. So as a professional athlete, you always want to get better. You always want to grow. So the weaknesses were fine. Strengths, not so much. I just, I would always like to compete, do the best that I can for the team. You know, team success for me is far greater than any individual accolade that you could get. So that was always where my mindset was at.
On that note, Matt Giteau, an absolute pleasure talking to us to relive your career. I just got to ask you as well, was Daddy a more Kirsty fan, or Mammy and Daddy a Kirsty fan, or who was get the plums as the best sports person in the Giteau house?
My older brother played rugby league and he's stuck with rugby league. He's actually coaching now still rugby league with the Canberra Raiders. So if dinner was served, he was the first one to get it because he could be playing third grade rugby league, but it's seen in my father, in his eyes, that he stayed loyal to the game. So that'll be the one.
That would be the one. On that note, Matt Giteau, a wonderful career for Australia, 02 to 2016, 103 appearances, 698 points, nominee for World Player of the Year in 2004, appeared in numerous World Cups, World Cup final in 2015. Matt, an absolute pleasure. Take care, sir.
Thank you very much.